Ivy Webster and Brittany Brewer made plans to have a sleepover at their best friend's house, Tiffany Guess, and stay there for the weekend. But by the time the weekend was through, all three would be found dead, along with Tiffany's siblings, mother, and stepfather. But how could a tragedy like this have happened? And could it have been prevented? Join us as we question everything about the case of Jesse McFadden. 14-year-old Ivy Webster and 16-year-old Brittany Brewer, living about a mile down the road from the Guess family, were best friends with 13-year-old Tiffany Guess. Tiffany, along with her siblings, 17-year-old Riley and 15-year-old Michael, shared a mother in Holly Guess, though they all had different fathers. Despite this, all the children regarded Joe, Holly's recently divorced husband, as their true father. Joe had been a constant presence in their lives, having been married to Holly for 13 years before their separation. In 2022, Holly entered a new chapter by marrying Jesse McFadden. Not much was known about him, and his presence elicited mixed feelings among those in the community. The parents of Ivy and Brittany, and Tiffany's other friends, hadn't really gotten to know Jesse well, but felt reassured enough to let their daughter spend the weekend at the Guess house, a place where nothing nefarious had ever been reported. Holly Guess had even conducted a background check on Jesse, honoring a promise she and Joe had made to vet anyone involved with their children, and she said the results came back clean. However, beneath this veneer of normalcy, Jesse harbored a more controlling nature. He meticulously monitored Holly's movements whenever she left the house and displayed an overprotective attitude towards the children, often taking their cell phones to scrutinize their Snapchat and other messages. These actions crossed the boundaries of typical parent oversight and ventured into overtly controlling behavior. Despite these warning signs, Holly did not perceive them as significant enough to warrant any concern. She was unaware of the extent of Jesse's darker inclinations, which remained hidden from her view. See, in 2003, Jesse McFadden committed a severe crime. He attacked a 16-year-old girl at knife point and forced himself sexually on her, a terrifying ordeal recounted by the victim, Crystal Smith.
I was tied up to all the metal poles of it with just different bungee cords of my dad's, different like belts, just whatever he could find. A knife held to my throat because I was screaming so loud. He's like, if you don't quit screaming, he's like, B, I'm going to kill you right here.
McFadden was subsequently arrested, and he pled guilty to first-degree sexual assault. The court convicted him and sentenced him to 20 years in prison, and during that time, McFadden shared a cell with another inmate who later provided insights into McFadden's character and behavior while incarcerated.
I would say about 6 months into it, I just realized how weird he was. His conversations would always turn into sexual conversations. I caught him, stalking nurses down at the medical facilities. He was just your very, very awkward, weird person.
Even though McFadden was in prison for a violent sexual crime, he got let out 3 years early on good behavior. In October 2020, McFadden was released from prison after serving 17 years of his 20-year sentence. And in 2022, he and Holly exchanged vows as they got married. He was now a free man. McFadden was supposed to be on the sex registry, but for some reason, Holly and her family weren't made aware and had no idea of his dark past. And in a strange decision, the Oklahoma Department of Corrections said McFadden wasn't released early, but instead, his sentence was considered served. This meant that McFadden wasn't on probation and didn't have to report to the Department of Corrections when he was released. This meant that not only was Holly not aware, but McFadden was allowed to be around her children, their friends, go to their sports games, their dance recitals, all illegally as a registered sex offender. By 2022, for all intents and purposes, Jesse McFadden was living free. It was a typical weekend plan for Ivy Webster, Brittany Brewer, and Tiffany Guess, who were set to spend the weekend at the Guess family home. Along with Tiffany's siblings, Riley and Michael, their mother Holly, and stepfather McFadden, the stage was set for fun and a carefree weekend. The girls were scheduled to stay over until Sunday evening, expecting to return to their homes by 5 p.m. The girls arrived at Tiffany's house, eager to enjoy their weekend together. Throughout the evening, Ivy stayed in touch with her mother, Ashley Webster, sharing pictures and lighthearted messages via their cell phones. Their exchange continued till around midnight when Ivy playfully texted, "Mom, you're past your bedtime." However, the tone of the night shifted dramatically when at about 1:30 a.m., Ivy's Life 360 app, a tool used by families to track each other's locations through GPS, suddenly turned off. Ashley Webster receives a text from Ivy's phone. The message claimed that her and the girls were headed to McAllister, a ranch owned by McFadden's family. But was this really Ivy texting? 5 p.m. approached, the time Ivy and her friends were supposed to return home. And around that same time, Jesse McFadden called Ashley, reporting that they were still at the McAllister ranch, but were having trouble getting cell service. Hours ticked by with no further updates, prompting Ashley and Brittany Brewer's father to report their daughters missing to the authorities. With no trace of Ivy or Brittany, an Amber Alert was issued at 10:30 a.m. Investigators shared that the last sighting of the girls was around midnight on Friday in McFadden's pickup truck. The appearance of McFadden's mugshot on the Amber Alert connected disturbing dots for the parents, heightening their fears. In response, police visited the guest residence but received no answer upon knocking on the door. After obtaining a search warrant, they returned around 3 p.m. Upon searching the property, they were met with a scene so disturbing it confirmed their worst fears, turning an already desperate situation into an absolute nightmare. All 7 individuals who had been staying there over the weekend were found deceased, each having suffered gunshot wounds to the head. The victims included Ivy, Brittany, and Riley, each with a single gunshot wound, found approximately a quarter-mile from the house. They were spaced about 100 yards apart in a manner that police suspected was deliberately staged. Tiffany and Michael each suffered 2 gunshot wounds, while Holly was shot 3 times. Their bodies were discovered in a heavily wooded area of the property, suggesting either another staged scene or a desperate attempt to flee their attacker. Jesse McFadden, identified as the perpetrator, ultimately turned the gun on himself. This appalling act not only overwhelmed responding police officers, but also delivered a devastating blow to the families of the victims. The community and investigators alike struggled to understand Jesse McFadden's motive. What could have driven him to commit such a heinous act? Well, it turns out McFadden's dark past gets even darker. While in prison for a violent sexual crime, he was found with a contraband cell phone in his possession. When guards looked through the phone, they found pictures, videos, and chat messages, all sexual and all with 16-year-old Caitlin Babb. Upon further inspection, it was obvious McFadden was grooming and manipulating this teen while carrying on a sexual relationship with her. He was charged with soliciting a minor and possession of CP, which calls into question why someone like this was released in the first place. He was already in jail for a violent sexual crime with an underage girl, and now he's forging another relationship with one before he's even served his time. McFadden's trial date for the charges incurred while imprisoned had been set several times over the past few years, but there were many obstacles. First, McFadden's attorney died, then the prosecutor on the case left for a new job, another prosecutor broke her foot a day before the trial, and then COVID hit and closed down the courts completely. These delays not only postponed justice, but also allowed McFadden to be released back into society. And after all that time, after McFadden got released, after he and Holly got married, and after the girls planned their sleepover, the trial date had finally come on May 1st, 2023. One night prior, the night of the murders, McFadden used a fake account to send a Facebook message to Caitlin Babb, the girl he had been grooming over the years. The girl that was due to appear in court to testify against him. A reporter reads his messages.
He says, "I did exactly what I promised I would do, and I made a great life like I promised I would with you. Now it's all gone. I told you I wouldn't go back. This is all on you for continuing this."
Sadly, Caitlin didn't understand what these messages meant until it was too late. McFadden also contacted his mother a couple days before the murder and told her that he wanted to end his own life. From these communications, we can glean his motives. For years, he had successfully hidden his past from his wife and family, and he wanted to keep it that way. He blamed other people for what he did, and the day before his court hearing, took the coward's way out. Instead of coming clean and going back to prison, he took himself out and took everyone else down with him. Remember when I said that Holly had a background check done of Jesse and it came back clean? Well, that wasn't entirely true. See, Holly's mother, Jeanette, actually was the one who came across McFadden's records. Her husband was checking the background of a coworker when they entered Jesse's name in and couldn't believe what they saw. Sexual violence, CP charges, registered sex offender. They immediately warned Holly that McFadden wasn't who she thought he was. Obviously shocked by what she heard, Holly went to McFadden and asked him about his past. This triggered a survival instinct in him as he came up with lie after lie to cover for himself. He even hired a woman to pretend to be Crystal, the girl he attacked, and talked to Holly to tell her it was all just a misunderstanding and he never attacked anyone. Holly took the bait and waved McFadden's past off as a misunderstanding, perhaps willfully turning a blind eye to this red flag. The cops' mishandling of the case also raised red flags. The texts sent to Caitlin Babb on the night of the murder were shown to cops, and nothing was done, as Crystal Smith explains.
She said everyone keeps blowing her off and not doing anything. She's been just shoved off to the back burner. And then last night, Jesse had messaged her, I guess from a fake account called Holidays. I have that screenshotted too, telling her, I've done everything I was supposed to do, and you just won't let well enough alone, basically. And now this is going to be on you. Basically, I felt like he was telling her he was going to do something, and she took it to I said, you need to take that to the cops. And she said, I did, and nothing's being done.
If they listened, perhaps they could have gotten to him before he had a chance to take his life, so they could give him the punishment he truly deserved. The investigation was also a shambles. First off, after one day, police declared the investigation closed and released the house as a crime scene. And 2 days after the murder, the families of the victims, along with the sheriff's investigator, toured the house for further evidence, and what they found was overwhelming. Locks and chains were bolted to several things around the house. There were sex toys out in the open, drugged candy, computers, and cell phones. Which is strange because the cops said they could only find 2 cell phones on their sweep of the house. And upon a second sweep by the parents, they found more cell phones, including Ivy's, and 2 laptops. Justin, Ivy's dad, found a receipt for the padlocks attached to the restraints purchased only a couple days earlier, showing that he was planning on using them that weekend. They also found a notebook filled with names, the last 6 entries being all 6 victims of the murders.
100%, this is a failure on our justice system. And this is a huge failure on their part. This is something that they could have stopped. This never had to happen.
Whether it was McFadden's personality, his dark past, or his way of living, there were plenty of red flags raised on this guy. For some reason, he was able to get everyone to look past everything. And should he have been released at all? Should sexually violent convicts get longer sentences or even permanent ones? All we know is that we must learn from our mistakes, see red flags for what they are, and stop tragedies like this from ever occurring in the first place. The sexual offender registry doesn't work. I think there needs to be action taken. There needs to be repercussions, and someone needs to be held accountable. They let a monster out. They did this. Thanks for watching. If you want something a little lighter, check this video out. If you want to stay dark, check this one out. Or if you want YouTube to decide for you, click here. Thanks everybody. I will see you next time.